think it's time to start. So today we're going to discuss perspectives and development of high-tech engineering in Russia. So today we have a great panel experts. Those who started as ideologists as engineering development in Russia, and also there are businessmen who are either involved in engineering or are into for it. As well as the representatives of the state. So I represent RUSNANO, being financial investors for engineering company. And our target today is to find out what themes and targets are most interesting for us as financial experts. So I would like to start asking the following question. What do you think is driving engineering in Russia? So in what niche, in what areas engineering can develop most effectively? And what tendencies and trends can you see today in this market? So I would like to ask Vladimir Dinin first, and Vladimir Knygin, so please share a point of view. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. So since a lot of people are going to speak after me, they will enlarge on what I'm going to speak, so we'll start. There are two questions as I see it. What are we doing today, and what would be better to deal with? So today, engineering I see is quite limited. And this is everything concerning mining, production, the oil, different kinds of oil, deep layers, and other kinds of oil. So all kind of production, as well as nuclear technologists. This is number two. Number three, huge object, huge volume, space and many huge Sputniks and transport. Well, defense, aviation, boating is ship construction. Yes, they can deal with engineering, but not too much. But electronics, so the Moore's law will stop acting. It means that we'll have the new generation of electronics. Then life science. It means everything concerning the human life, including biotechnologies, new materials. So it looks as though, well, new materials are coming to change for what used to be for production, and smart systems, production, internet, etc., all kind of smart technologies. So here, modeling, digital modeling, calculation is priority here, including software as well as communication, and data transference. So clear enough, we'll deal with the areas where engineering is in demand, and there are other spheres where engineering is not developed as well, but these are spheres which can be profitable in future. So where do you think it makes sense to concentrate in Russia? Could you please name one or two areas most important, and probably explain what internal trends or drivers are of paramount importance here? So you've named the global tendencies. What about Russia? What would you think it makes sense to start? Well, speaking about production, they are impossible without electronic, and we need to get these new technologies. So all smart systems, CAD systems, managing systems, etc., is and should be essential. New materials is another sphere because it is a possibility, an opportunity for us to get to something of the other generation. On the other hand, there are risks for the so-called traditional production, traditional mechanisms, and traditional materials. Electronics, smart systems, controllers, LEDs, etc., and new materials. So today, this is what I see today is very relevant and most relevant. And I would like to ask Roman Romanovsky. He already started to move towards engineering. So what is your logic? Where are you moving? What trends and drivers and niches can you see for yourself as a businessman, as a private business representative? So first and foremost, a few words what we are doing today. Well, I represent Renova. I'm in charge of the program for the Center of Covering Materials. So we are the controlling share holders of the Swiss company Com, which is the world leader of the technology for coverage. So the fundamental basics for the technologies we use today were invented in the Soviet Union. Then for 30 and 40 businesses, huge high-scale businesses, developed using those technologies in a lot of areas. So we had very difficult 30 and 40 years. So very often we are far aside, and our technologies were applied only in war technologies. So this is the area for which they were invented. So today we are in for solutions. For me, transport and our construction and microelectronics is something new. And what I mean here is new materials for construction. And the most important segments are construction for oil and gas, for all kind of engines. So hopefully engine powers of will be developing today. What is most important for demand here? Well, costs, eco-regulations requiring new materials and new technologies for engines, and progress, the global progress, and it can be revealed in many spheres. For instance, the regulation for the burning temperature develop. So this is a combined process. So the drivers are standards, including ecological one, and some objective competitive environment, including scientific and technological progress, which makes the old technologies either unprofitable or uncompetitive. Thank you very much, and I would like to give the floor to Pavel Selenko, company Com. And again, the question is, what segments do you see for high technology, high-tech engineering? Pavel, the floor is yours. Well, thank you for invitation. First of all, our company is a leader in production for accumulators. So we are in developing our activity. So starting to determine the lead market. This is actually what we deal with. We came to the conclusion that this all has social background. What does it mean? What kind of community you would like to create? That is why the concept of future mobility means that we'll have free transport, but this means a different structure for the community. It means different kinds of circumstances within the infrastructure of cities and towns. Smart grid is another concept. What does it mean? It does not only mean we'll stop using huge power objects and venues, but the whole concept of internet and power plants will be changed. Energy will be with you all the time. So in other words, engineering should think not only of the structures and the customers of today, but the structures which are going to be constructed in future, well, presuming the trends we can see today. We can see the structures which do it quicker than ours. So we are to just introduce such a concept of engineering, such engineering products which will correspond to this new requirement. So we are to create the wholesome concept of our future consumer and develop a product for that consumer. We are to make prognosis, to forecast that future consumer. This is the strategy. Thank you very much. And now I'd like to give the floor to the next speaker. And this is a great person who's been successfully chairing an engineering center with the international experience. And this is Alexey, Vice Director in Prospective Projects. So please share your point of view. What kind of high-tech niches and areas you can see? And what do you think are the drivers for each of these areas and niches? Thank you, Alexey. Thank you for invitation. So the Center for Engineering is a joint program of Ministry of Defense and Science and Ministry of Science. So we figure out more than 200 centers, each having unique specialization and competence. Our center specializes in computer engineering, which is a very important chain, a part of the technology, and which is most scientifically consuming. So many of those chains are present on the market, and these are PLM technology, PDM technologies. Many of them have undergone the technical revolution as computer design. When CAD system improved the energy consumption. Now when everybody can use CAD, and we can see CAD with a new generation one. So the global competitive structure is moving and developing because, well, the majority of intellectual know-how is. So the new software systems are created within new maths models, digital models. So these are the solutions. Everything else is the same. So digital engineering is the unity of materials. That's number one. Now composites and composite structures are most important there. And on gross and minute level, micro, meso, and macro level. But the most important focus is on the molecular process. Number two are the processes, starting from physical, mechanical, and the technology. And number three is the product, because everybody is in for product. So materials, process, and construction, mainly product. Speaking about drivers, what are them? So car construction, automobile construction is is the leader here. BMW, Daimler, Audi, and other companies. So 20 or 30 platforms, softwares for the cars of today. We keep up with the new technologies, and we do what the humans and the market learn only 3 years later after we have done it. So this is of paramount importance. So it's better to work with the leaders for 3 years, forecast and prognosis. So let me bring about an example. Cottage is a great project with huge consortium headed by Porsche Engineering, and as a result, the technologies go to Russia. And the Central Institute tries to accumulate them, thus constructing, setting up the frontline engineering center. And these drivers set up the new targets, which is reduction of labor, costs. Thus, they started bionicle design as their new priority. What does it mean? The steel will not give up, not be beaten by composites that quickly. But what does it mean? Advancement effective technologies is the answer, where adhesive technology is the driver, laser burning. Speaking about ceramic and laser selective composites, speaking about metals, polymers, and composites. So two ways meet: supercomputer engineering with different kind of optimization. So when you start an optimum virtual model, very often there is the answer: we cannot do it, we cannot succeed this kind of alloys. But there are new engineering centers, and 3 years later, the market of adhesive production develops. So this is the major trend. So we have to keep up with it, otherwise we will be too late. So Russia is among tops and front lines in maths and computer engineering and additive technologies. So if we combine these two, then we get to space technologies, nuclear energy, helicopter construction, etc., etc. So again, computer engineering and top technologies, top production. This is the most important area which we are to fund today. It makes sense.
Опять же, говорить про Россию. Вы занимаетесь компьютерным One more question to the point. If we're talking about Russia, you are involved in computer engineering, and at first glance this is a virtual part of the process, but at the same time it is connected to the materials, to the equipment, material-based. And if we talk about this transition from computer engineering to more material world, what could be the focus for us in Russia? What material platform we should localize here, or we should create our own? Well, modern production on the global level is the concurrent level and concurrent engineering. For example, the databases. If we talk about the modern car, for example, this is 250 materials and 15 different curves for of its behavior, and along with the designing, it is necessary to replenish the database, and the calculation methods are used for the new materials, which are standard. Of course, this is the simultaneous work together with the technologists and engineers, and we cannot afford to manufacture a unit if we do not understand what kind of machinery will be necessary to manufacture it. And we cannot do the styling of certain units, so that we will have to reprogram the robots to weld our construction. So everything is interconnected. At first phase it is styling, the second is aerodynamics, and the third is computer engineering. All these processes go simultaneously, in parallel and full-time, 24 hours. Okay, clear, thank you. And next, I would like to give floor to representatives of the government and to hear to their opinion, to listen to their opinion. What are the premises for the engines of the market, and what they took into account developing the support measures for high-tech engineering in Russia. And first, I would like to ask Vasily Smakov, the Director of the Strategic Department of the Ministry of Industry of the Russian Federation. Thank you very much. The first part of the answer is to the niches. It can be divided into two big blocks. First, the prospective line is those industries or projects which have potential in relation to the specifics, theoretical and territorial relations, specificities of the Russian Federation. And my immediate intention is to do something in the food industry, because everybody wants to eat, and we have to now to replace the imports, and the equipment at many food enterprises is a German one, and or made in Slavonic countries. So it is important for engineering to build the food processing plants. I don't think it's high-tech, but nevertheless it's closely related to biotechnologies. The second block is what is necessary now due to the geopolitical situation. And putting it frankly, it is quite sensitive. The situation, international situation, affected it badly. Is the engineering in oil and gas industries, and what is done by Roman Romanovsky, and I think he was not talking quite sincerely, because the investments go into agro-industrial sector, and this is kind of secret story. On the other hand, it is also quite sensitive when we find that it is possible to turn off the modernization process in the country, and it is very easy just to stop selling the advanced advanced packages. And for example, if we take a certain defense industry enterprise, in general, only 3 of a big number of projects can be replaced with engineering. And this is related to the niches, which is related to oil and gas industries, shelf processing and shelf drilling, Arctic equipment for drilling, etc. So taking into account these premises, we structure certain instruments for support. Thank you, it's clear. And nevertheless, what is for you more a priority if you want to choose the instruments? Is this a political situation or a market situation, or it can be different? I understand that the geopolitical situation is now go through changes, but the number of instruments of support was initiated a couple of years ago. The situation then was different, now it is also different. Well, there are 2 genres of activity. We develop engineering in the state sector, and another approach is developing of engineering in non-state sector. And if in agricultural industry, in defense industry, we can put an enterprise and everything will be related to the state defense orders. As to the business engineering, we have to apply fine-tuning. For example, what is done by RVK, FIOP, and other companies. And we structure certain instruments of indirect support. If we talk about the Rota company, for example, we subsidize certain credit interest rates. And by this, we involve and we stimulate the participation in these innovative projects. We have these cases in different places, like in Mordovia, for example. And the center of the Photonica Center, the operators switched from the state subsidizing to the market subsidizing. And I think this is mainly the changes in the instruments. But if we look in the short-term period, this is an issue of national security. But in the long-term prospect, this is an issue of national competitiveness. And now I want to give the floor to Grigory Sinchenia, the Deputy Head of Department of Science and Industrial Politics and Entrepreneurship in Moscow. We're not going to show the presentation, and I'll try to be free from this presentation, although we have prepared it. Well, our approach to engineering is a simple one. If we look at the point from at least from the point of view of the demand, what is in demand for Moscow companies, we will see big parts of Moscow and infrastructure companies like power generation and supply. This is about 50% of the Moscow market, and all the rest is high-tech engineering. We also strive to support it. As to the civil engineering, construction, and power generation, we have certain priorities, and they are formed in connection to a number of criteria. First, how much is the manufacturing in Moscow gives the taxable base for the city, and also the fast-growing new sectors. As to the industry giving the tax incomes, revenues, we also define certain sectors, and we take into account historical aspects. For example, innovative territorial clusters, like in Zelenograd. And this is related to the development of microelectronics and communication technologies. And indeed, it includes certain parts which require strong support. We don't have, for example, our own technology of this 3D manufacturing, for example, and we have to help them. Another priority, a point of growing, is the Troysk Innovative Cluster. We're talking about the new materials, photonics, nuclear materials, nuclear technologies, and this indeed belongs to the vectors of growth, which have to be developed if we talk about the innovative approaches. Recently, we have created a new cluster for the composite materials, and we look very attentively to the formation of the Moscow biotechnology cluster. Vasily mentioned the food industry, and this indeed includes food industry and the parts of agricultural industry, etc. And we will find the instruments, and we will inform how to approach the development of this sector. And also, I would like to ask you to point out the main growth engines for these sectors. Why? What will make grow these sectors? In your view, what sectors will have the biggest potential? The main growth engines are, first of all, the demand, and this is not the non-technological engineering. This refers to, for example, the civil construction. And this is more or less good because the demand is high, and there are companies which are involved in the construction, housing construction. And as to the other engines of growth, these are the second part of the development. Maybe we should switch to the second part of the discussion, and we have to talk about the supportive measures which are planned. But in general, we want to cover all the sectors in engineering with a number of integrated measures, non-differentiated in regard to particular sectors, but in general creating the conditions to improve the competitiveness of these companies. And keeping in mind the priorities that I mentioned already, the formation of clusters and the formation of points of growth. Thank you. And before giving the floor to other speaker, please speak closer to the microphone because you are not heard properly. And I would like to readdress this question to Artem Shadrin, the Director of the Department of Innovative Growth of the Ministry of Development. Well, first of all, there are four direct mechanisms for the support of the innovation activities. Subsidies from the Ministry of Education and Science. We have two subsidies from our ministry. This is the ministry's given. These are the subsidies given to the subjects of the Russian Federation, and the subsidies given by our ministry to the innovative territorial clusters. Last year it was 13 clusters, and this year it is already 25. And last year it was 1.3 billion rubles, and this year this will be 2.5 billions. And more than half of the requirements from the regions go to support the engineering centers. And this is one of the main lines of the support of regional developments. And there are also instruments of support shown by the state institutes of development. This is, first of all, the Russian venture company. This gives financing to the support to the Russian other venture companies, and to the foundation RUSNANO, again through the special venture companies. And now, what is the global task facing these instruments. First of all, to cover the discrepancy between the development of Russian Academy of Sciences institutions and the industrial research centers and the products themselves which should go to the market. And when we talk about the shortage of investments and the lack of business angels, but in fact we should say that we lack the competences which help to transform the idea into the practical products. From this point, the engineering centers allow to cover this discrepancy, and this interest from the point of the support measures is not by chance.
And as I see it, engineering centers can have a major target, more strategic target. So we have federal target programs for investment of fundamental issues for developing a new technology. So these reports transform into products which are required on the market. So for the global partnership, this again is very narrow tonal, and you can just take this position having a consortium supporting the research supported by the state, so from the beginning to the market. Okay, a good example is a new electronic or photonic. So what is photonic? We're following mainstream today. So to transform the laser production and other products to the market, we need a professional team ready to invest marketing together or in partnership with the businesses. So what does it mean? The engineering companies, together with the state-supported programs, will be successful. So not long ago, there was an order to have an initiative, a consortium. So this is what we could do. The same can be true about photonics. So not long ago, we had a conference on modernization. Development of consortium, development of cooperation is what is necessary today. So we are to determine the priorities and target at the merge of new directions. So we can be leaders there. So being more specific, medical technologies can be a good example. So oil production and refinery technologies, speaking about medicine, biotechnology, pharmaceutical sectors are of paramount importance. So the pharmaceutical centers in Novosibirsk, for instance, are based on engineering mainly. So engineering can be the core here for enhancing the productability of all this technology. So you've said some words about the regional engineering centers. So, and you named several industries where you think engineering in Russia can be competitive and in demand. So the question is, so these regional centers you set up, are they part of this specialization? And is marketing and the market an important component here? So will they survive without the state support? Well, this is a dilemma, as I said. So quite logically, engineering can be competitive very soon. Infrafond, for instance, is a good example here. RUSNANO partially too, but there is another logic. Let's set up a fundamental research institute, scientific and research enabling speed up of development, all in all development of the new startups, of the new ideas, and will enhance their emerge on the market. So this institute cannot necessarily be the participant, the player on the market, but this is the model for Technopark of Novosibirsk. So this research institute helps under private companies providing services for them. So this is a scheme which works here. Concluding the first part of our discussion, space, oil and gas, engineering, car construction are the most important areas here. So, plus materials, computer engineering as an instrument, and the materials as another segment, penetrating in all these sectors. So going to the second part of our discussion, let us start discussing the following issues. So what instruments of state support do you think can be most productive? How effective they prove to be? And another question for businesses. How successful your experience in the use of the state instruments was? And one more question. So we figured out three types of engineering companies, case companies in Russia. So the first group of engineering companies are already existing companies who plan to have more engineering, who plan to get internationally and need new instruments. The second case is, an international company, a big company, who would like to get to the Russian market, to enter there. So, and as we see it, the best way could be a partnership to promote the technologies for Russia. This is the second segment. And the third one is an engineering with a big Russian player who could be the customer on the one hand and a consultant on the other hand. So together we could figure out the requirements for that. So this is the topic for our discussion, and I would like all of you not only to assess the instrument of set support and to assess these three modules of interaction. This is critical for us to understand what to invest, how to invest, and what to look for. So let me start the second part, giving the floor to Vasily Osmakov with his presentation concerning results. Speaking about engineering of the Ministry of Entrepreneurship and Science and Trade. So we decided to use another model, but our colleagues from Ministry of Ecology used, because they have the programs for support of small and medium business, and the other program deals with ecology. So, this is a more infrastructural company, I should say. Speaking about Ministry of Defense, they focus more on universities. which are part of the Ministry of Education and Science. So the ministry has some plan and just informs on it the educational institutions. So we have a different point of view. So the ministry says we want to break everything they do within the system of higher education. Well, we try to do it in a way. So last year, we created a program. So we are issuing the recent regulation system for funding engineering companies and small and medium-sized business companies. So within our company, there are several activities. The first thing we deal with together with the Ministry of Education and Science is the support of new technologies in the form of KPI and private partnership. So sometimes we succeed, sometimes not, we don't. So again, let me ask you how successful this instrument is. Would you like me to answer as an official or as a businessman? Well, as an official, I would say yes. As a businessman, I should say, well, partially yes, partially not so. First of all, I was more skeptical towards it, but now I'm less skeptical. Why so? It can be a driver.
And indeed, there are small institutions which can be not very interesting because this can be very difficult because the competition is very difficult and it is necessary to prepare the documentation package, so it is not an easy story, and so that's why it doesn't give the result. The second part is the credit interest rates, and in fact the situation is quite difficult and we have to slow down our loan processes. We expected 8% interest rate for the credits of the December of last year, but nevertheless we haven't received the loans yet, and we expected the loans the beginning of this year, so the process is postponed. On the other hand, we have positive stories, like in Mordovia, we expect the participation of ROTEC, and the subsidizing of the interest rates push the people out of the zone of comfort, and this makes people work more actively. Another approach is the subsidizing for the software for the final users, end users, and we want to come to the situation when the small and middle-sized companies, engineering and designing companies, so that they could buy the designing software with the discount of 75%. In fact, it is similar to the program of special car buying loans, like the Ministry of Trade. And as to this, our instrument, we launched this project together with the Russian manufacturers of the software, and we expect that this instrument will have the character of a market instrument. And please follow our website and our announcements. So we expect that we will put on it certain announcements in a couple of weeks. Besides, we implement quite important things which are not very expensive, but nevertheless they have high priorities. For example, we try to form the system of statistical observation or surveillance for the sector of engineering, because statistically it doesn't exist, and we've been working we plan to work for 3 years with the Russian Statistical Committee or agency, and in many cases we copy what the Ministry of Economy used to be doing. We expect that by the end of the next year we will be able to give certain evaluations of the engineering market. What is the structure and what companies exist in this market? Next step is the implementation of the fund of standards. It was said that in Moscow, the construction is very active, but their main problems is to reform and to improve the system of standards and regulatory acts. And we have an example when a state organization orders the research and development. There is a chapter in this research project, ergonomics, and this ergonomics correspond to the state standards of 1975. And we plan to give more standardization to these aspects, and then other aspects are developing of education and improvement, professional skills improvement standards, which will correspond more to the requirements of the business. And we hope this corresponds to the activities of our colleagues from Ministry of Economy and Ministry of Education. I would like to listen to other representatives of the state bodies, Grigory and Artyom. What can you say? What was achieved by Moscow? Well, what are the results in Moscow? Well, the same like Vasily was saying, it is too early to talk about the results, because the engineering support policies do not have very old roots. And we use the instruments which were had been created on the federal level, and we try to implement the best parts of it. For example, we have created the Troitsk Regional Engineering Center on the basis of new magnetic materials, and this is the specialization of the Troitsk cluster. Vasily mentioned the engineering centers at the higher education universities. These are the 6 universities in Moscow, and this is the support of the cluster of the 3D integration. We plan to support it, and this is what we try to do. And we also develop new approaches for the integrated program for the development of engineering. We plan to see it by the end of this year, and we'll try to discuss it with the expert community. In general, it is similar to what Vasily mentioned, because there are certain standards for the construction and for high technology engineering. It is necessary for high technology engineering to compensate the investments, to improve its competitiveness. And when we discussed the benefits in the IT sector, the word engineering also was included there, but at that moment we did not have the proper definition for the engineering, and these benefits were lost. Only the benefits for the social payments were introduced. We can wait long enough until the decision is taken at the federal level, and I heard that the Prime Minister had certain assignments, but taking into account the present budget situation, it is difficult to discuss all these solutions. Nevertheless, in our practice, we discuss the possibility to introduce the subsidies for the priority lines of activity. because in their structure of costs, 60 to 80% is the personnel costs. And among other innovations, I can mention the inter-institutional or inter-university professional education. We used to do a similar thing with the Moscow Physical and Technical Institute, and now we took the education law and we tried to use the new possibilities of this law. If you, for example, if a student takes the Magister program and he obtains the diploma of the Magister, it means that you can use after that a student can use the competences of other higher education institutions. And now we have this joint integrated program for the 6 universities. 30,000 of students started to study this training. Each of the students has certain special topic in a particular research company, and we try to implement this program. And this program is aimed to obtain the unique competences for the market. In fact, the market does not have the necessity of too many engineers with specific research skills, but having the integrated program between the different universities, we can indeed fine-tune the skills of a certain student for the necessities of a particular company. And through this, we can obtain certain unique specialists for the engineering. And the Ministry of Education likes this approach, and if this pilot program gives positive results, we will extend this program to other things. We also can subsidize the additional education and the retraining of the specialists. This is also another issue to discuss at the level of the government, taking into account the priorities. And probably we will do something similar to what the Ministry of Industry is doing, subsidizing the costs for the engineering services procurement by the companies. Because when you contact directly the production, it is okay. Otherwise, you must return the subsidy, etc. Well, I understand. Thank you. But these are the programs which are in the process of being launched. Well, what already exists at the federal level is already launched, and on the local level, it is more of plans, and we're discussing it as the development of the regional programs. Well, thank you. And then I have the question to Artyom. Well, I will not be very original. I think it's too early to talk about the results so that they will be persuasive and quite showing. But we plan the activities with those instruments that I mentioned at the very beginning to improve the efficiency of the existing programs. Well, maybe we should do it in a different way. I will ask Vladimir Nikolaevich what tasks he sees as strategically important for his industry and for his framework. And then you can comment what programs from your list correspond or coincide with the approach of Vladimir Nikolaevich. I would like to ask Vladimir Nikolaevich what are the immediate programs and tasks that we have to solve from the point of view of engineering. You are provoking me, Alexey. Well, McKinsey founder George McKinsey once wrote that he is an engineer of management. and I forgot the name of the first person who prepared the structural organigram for one of the railroads of the United States. He introduced the uniform and he put the number of the department at the uniform of each employee, and he gave to all employees their skills and rights, whether somebody can pull this or that lever. And that guy also called himself the engineer organizer of the railroad. And when we discuss the different programs of the support of engineering, we are not discussing the new type of activities in the country, but we're discussing a very clear and easy thing, how to change the level and the quality of engineering work in the country. And from here I understand what the Ministry of Trade is doing. There are 4 components: Ministry of Industry and Trade. There are 4 elements in every company: constructor and technological solutions. Another part is the software, which allows to implement the solutions. Hardware or material base, which allow to use all this. And the fourth is the personnel, the people who have necessary skills and competences. And the support to engineering is when we fix we observe certain drawbacks in the software. For example, the present software is the support for the engineering works of the previous century. So the problem is to provide the necessary software for the new developments. I think that the next step and the next problem or challenge will be the hardware and the necessary engineering base for this. We have very strong calculating devices and computing devices. Another point is the personnel issue. We don't have the representatives from the Ministry of Industry and Education, from the Ministry of Education and Science, but it is very important to have the necessary programs for education for the personnel to work with the soft and hardware. Is it available only for if there are these programs, are they available for the state or the private companies? We're talking about consortia, but we're talking about the blocks of technical solutions available not only to individual companies in the market, but to a series of companies, to groups of companies which can be in different parts of the supply chain. And as a resume, first of all, the support of engineering is the support for the engineering work. And we face a situation when the engineering activities are expanding to the situation of in the field of other industries of spheres of activities. For example, engineers now are replacing the managers, because the new level of solutions and the new level of decision is necessary. Second point is when we support the engineering activities, we have to understand that we fall back in a number of activities. If we talk about the state-managed activities, we have to see this falling behind, and we have to catch up. And next step is to understand and to determine what is technological platforms, what is the management of the cycle. And I looked into certain programs, but nobody is talking about the engineering services. But this will be a hit in the engineering activities of the next decades. And the whole block of technological findings can be obtained there. But I think this will be in the next iteration. For the moment, we're involved in the activities for civilizing the new formats of engineering works. First of all, on the basis of the program platforms and the new instruments for the engineering designing. But all the rest of engineering activities also exist, and it is necessary to focus on it as well. So far, we concentrated only on this block of engineering activities.
Let me specify one important issue. So you've covered this systemic component, namely instruments, tools for the engineering area, for engineering in Russia. So, and the level of engineering in Russia and in the world. So where we are among the tops, where we are far behind. So you've named several segments where there are drivers for development at which are respective for Russia and for the world. So for the development, we are to fix some steps and products. I mean, in some areas we can see about final products. In some areas we can some intermediary products. So for businessmen and us as potential investors, it is most vital to understand where we're to move, what direction we're to go. So does it make sense to take ready product in other countries, or use what we have here, developing? Sorry, I didn't got your question. But take what you like. I mean, if it's more profitable for you to purchase something, do it. If you want to fund some technologists, please do it. For instance, we have constructors here. They have new kind of drivers. What does it mean? They have smart drivers, and we get so managing on of unstable systems. This is what we already had in Iran's, etc. What does it mean? So we'll have total penetration of new electronics everywhere. Why so? Well, clear enough. And we'll have digital modeling, which will enable to get to virtual e-machinery. So, I mean, well, just imagine you have a signal. We have an electronic digital signal of virtual communication, and we're in for the whole system of machinery and devices like that. So, is that true, or is that not true that the drivers are the consumers? Well, really, the technology is a driver, and the consumers are the drivers, and that altogether enables, pushes, and modelize the whole processes. So, I mean, the situation of today is that we consume everything which already exists on the market, and Alexey Ivanovich does that. So he says he doesn't make a design in just typical 3D systems, but he designs multi-scale venues, highly precise, and this accuracy increases and that improves the whole construction process. And now, And now imagine a true story. Well, I hope it's true, but my colleagues told me about it. There is an institute in Belgium which had a lot of scientific ideas, and they didn't know how to and where to apply them. But suddenly, Hopkins Hospital had an order for the system of the so-called smart hospital. So they accumulated all the technologies the institute had. So, I mean, they had some technologies they already started to use, and they are planning to make use of other technologies. So, I mean, as soon as we start using the smart fuselage system for airplanes, we'll find out where what we are lacking in, because the burden will be calculated much more precisely, and we'll find out that much more things can be put into this airplane. It can be loaded by much more things. I mean, so the more precise technologies we have, the more precise technologies will be further required. So, and this is a good example, because these new types of construction and engineering is developing explicitly. So when you start asking me what we are to use, we are to imply engineering everywhere you can. Thus, integrating all this in the systems like smart hospitals, smart factories, smart roads. And as soon as we have got this, we'll figure out what is important and what is unnecessary. So today, there are two little systems which can gather all these technologies together, all the technologies which are existing already, figure out what is necessary and what is not. Well, I absolutely agree with the previous speaker. Car construction, automobile construction is a driver. So we have aviation construction engineering, but very little of them can be integrators, can be leaders to integrate all that. So as soon as we have such leaders that will enable further cooperation in technologies. So sorry for taking so much time. So let me ask Alexey and Artyom. So the question is, when will we have this fully robotized, automized network? And what hinders it? It is not actually so important what particular area can be robotized. So you are the drivers, you are among leaders, you are among the tops, but what prevents you for reaching such a target? I don't mean you to integrate all that, but still it's a question to you, being a leader. So the 16th of September, there was the presidium or presidential board of the presidential council. So we discussed several terms, inter-aerial, interdepartmental national projects and consortiums. So this was discussed explicitly, and the target is to have this target. let's remember the times of Korolev and the space as a target program. So today we are to figure out new targets. For instance, foods. This is a problem, and this can be a challenge and a target. As soon as we have set it, then we start creating the mechanism of solving it. Powders, printing machines, foods, all these should be accurate, specific targets. So for that, structure should be created. So we discussed it with Mr. Dolke, and that is actually a cooperated network which unites several directions. They are to work in combinations, and each department will be unable to work without the other ones. So they are to reach the target as a joint consortium. So one, for instance, Dragon for the International Space Station was made like this. So NASA stopped the monsters like Boeing, and so they started figuring out what this initiative is. And it was successful. So this should be a principle of consortium. So this is and should be not a team of great companies, but the actors, whether each of them should be equally important for the reach of this target. So today it's time when the old paradigm doesn't work anymore, but there was a scheme existing, and new product should be and was to be created. Elon Musk, you've brought about his as an example, and NASA, which stopped huge so-called monsters, giving the way to that company, to that project. So would you like to stop some other companies to give way to others? So let's look at the project Cortege. It's one of the most famous ones. So as soon as the investment was voiced, it turned out that practically each and every person can do it. So dozens of companies started to apply to it, and even could illustrate some and bring about some example. But then another player appeared, NAMI, headed by Nagalts. And they started watching how this conglomerate, this network was working. And it turned out that just several teams can work with these issues jointly. Some time ago, they said it was impossible, but it was an international project consortium which will hopefully work further. We can see that the sanctions didn't stop such kind of cooperation, and that is a cooperation which is most productive and most dynamic. And this is a very positive example quite typical, by the way. So let's study it inside and out and scale it and copy it to other departments and areas. And Spear 6 and the US is a good example. Porsche Engineering was the driver, wasn't it? No, it wasn't. When we started to act as Porsche, nobody believed us, but when Porsche applied for it, then the states and the community believed the initiative. So that is quite strange but difficult for this country. So many years ago, when nuclear constructions started mass construction, they were to subdivide engineering into three types of engineering: the order engineering, for project engineering, and technology engineering. So speaking about Porsche, they stick to order engineering, engineering of order. So Alexey doesn't speak about the team. So, you know, so many people work on it. But so the figure is huge. So several dozens of people produce a lot of thousands of spare parts. And this is a modal construction. We have never constructed platforms like this. It looks like Lego, which enables to change the models. And only several dozens of people do it. So this is the technology engineering and the order engineering. What about the project engineering? Well, this is a good, positive story. Let's ask Alexey. And Alexey started asking who will construct the product line. I was sure that they will do everything, but Alexey said no. Who were the players then? NAMI, the institute? Well, if I understand you correctly, the picture is, there is a national project, so cottage or moon transport. Then the general order engineering company is selected, and for that, a consortium for technological engineering as a team is set up. And so what should happen next? Well, some companies started to leave the consortium. They were afraid they will not get the order. But it so happened that the team was gathered, governed by the Scientific and Research Institute of St. Petersburg. So if we speak about quality engineering of the top level of today, so any competitive product on the market should appear, and for that it requires engineering. So the question is how complex it is and how competitive it is. One of my students just went to Riga, and the city of Riga, and he set up a construction plant, and he really loves it. So he thinks it's very complicated. So he integrates 60 components, and this is still difficult for him. So, I mean, don't wait for a huge order as very complicated network of modern cars. No, we don't wait for anything. My question is, do we have an opportunity? Is there an opportunity to make a project and to start up another project like that? My question is to Roman Romanovsky. So you've said some companies start leaving this consortium.
I think that the process you launch now is quite costly and complicated. And what was mentioned about the business and strategy, how much it corresponds to the supportive instruments from the state bodies. Well, whether it is enough or not, when we came to the Ministry of Industry and Trade, to Vasily, and our first dialogue was as follows, and we agreed. I think it is not correct when the state gives money for financing the capital expenditures, the equipment, machinery, the buildings, and I put myself in the position of the state bodies, and I understand that it's difficult to control this risk, so that to avoid the situation when the money is stolen. And I always speak to my engineer how to use the money smartly. If there is a private investor, then I really feel very bad about the state money. So the correct approach is that you first try to find the best way with the investors yourself, and we will help with the loan. And 15% of my capex is related not to high technology equipment, but to the program of personal training and the transfer of capital. And at the same time, it is not a security that I could give as security to the bank. And I think it would be very wise to compensate the expenses for the transfer of. Well, I have the already the relations with a Western partner, and we sign an agreement with it. And we find the solution that the agreement must correspond to certain requirements. And I try to teach my personnel not what should be taught at the university, but I train them and teach them for the correct use of the skills, accumulated skills, which is not given at the university. So the idea is that I would like to propose this idea for the discussion for the state support measures. And the second issue I would like to discuss, when the state support the engineering developments, we get the relations of these new companies with the traditional industrial research organizations. Normally, these organizations or institutions form part of the state budgetary organizations or the certain corporations, and these institutions haven't had enough financing for decades. And now these institutions started to shift to the commercial structures, and they're kind of engineering companies themselves. They find the industrial customers, and this is good and bad at the same time. Good because they maintain and they retain their functions, but on the other hand, it is bad because the state institutions have the functions of control for the implementation of new developments. And on the other hand, they are developing certain solutions themselves. It means that the state institutions do not allow the new developments to be introduced in the industries. So it is necessary to analyze what are the industrial institutions, research institutions in the country. If they have the control for the new developments, it must be separated, and it should be given to the state bodies, purely state bodies. I understand that I run risk to attract certain critics, but if we look in detail into this function, it could be interesting for you, for the foundation of structural and investment programs. It can be an interesting object of fund of investments on behalf of the Western companies who are interested in the Russian market. So I see a good future for these companies. Of course, we should you should not abuse these functions. Of course, some competences must be retained with the state bodies. But I think that some technologies which belong to the historical industrial research institutions, it should be a benefit to launch these technologies into the market and to be as a support for the company supported by the Ministry of Industry and Trade. Well, I would like to ask somebody to sum up all this. We talked about the products and the division between the engineering approaches. Well, I would talk about organization and managerial issues. First of all, efficiency of the engineering centers as the innovative structure supported by the state. For this purposes, we formed the project office on the basis of the Russian venture company, and it follows 4 targets: development of clusters, technological platforms, implementation of technological programs for the 60 biggest companies, RUSNANO, Rostec, Gazprom, etc., and others, and the support for the engineering centers, the monitoring of their activities, benchmarking, etc. And through this organizational structure, we want to monitor the possible drawbacks and errors, and on the other hand, to expand the best practices. And we want to provide the integration of these instruments for the companies with the state participation. For example, we have high demand for the new technological solutions, and we can contribute to the transfer of these companies to the new technological standards as the partner, as the participant of the market. And those competences formed there, we want to launch these processes. Another point is the instruments which form the cluster. This is the formation of the new system of supplies for the big companies so that they transfer from the planned economies to the new technologies, and the innovative centers could help this. The program of cluster development can provide the flexible set of instruments. These are the possibilities opportunities for the cluster. And for the next year, 2.5 billion subsidy, and please decide what kind of educational programs can be necessary. We can do this. And the second part of the question, or my answer to the question, is the modernization of the institutes or universities. We have created a new initiative on the basis of the Russian venture company. This is the project of commercialization of technologies on the basis of the scientific centers. It includes not only the research institutes of Russian Academy of Sciences, but also industrial research institutions. And we want to create the idea of support of research programs and the startups, which must be based on the new approaches and involving the business angels and venture investors, etc., so that it could give the highest possible qualitative effect. And we expect that the results of the research would be converted into the startups and the research and development, and it also create the place for the engineering centers. It can be done on the basis of the universities. It can be a spin-off company or a company working closely with the universities. We want that the work, common work with the universities, could help to development of engineering in the country. And finally, remembering the assignments from the government in the August of this year, 22 assignments after the open meeting in the government. This is to support the innovative projects. We thought a lot what kind of project this could be. For example, this is the initiative for the new industrial technologies. It can be photonic, and today we discussed smart technologies for the housing, for the hospitals, and this is could be an example of the leading project. And another possible scheme is the model of management of the motorcade or cortege program, and this could help the transformation of the big companies. This is first, and the second is potential order to from the state bodies to the commercial companies, and this can provide the new order with the new budget-effective solutions, and we are going to work in this format, and I think this is one of the answers to your questions. Well, let me sum up our round table. So what I understand, besides the segments pointed by our participants, and this could be space, oil and gas, microelectronics, and machinery building. Other points is what can stimulate the growth and consolidate the competences. These are two things: the creation in Russia of the engineering integrators. First of all, the integrators of technology, and I think in this we can use as support the existing engineering centers. And the second point is these national initiatives or the leading projects, which could give the focus or vector for consolidation of certain consortia around themselves, what Viktor Ivanovich mentioned. And as the measure of the support of the interest rates, which could be balance the Western loans with the Russian ones. And another point is that there is a number of demands for the subsidies, and in the West, the companies already have passed through certain education in this. And the partial answer is that this can be done through the engineering clusters and engineering centers in particular centers. And localizing these centers, you can get a subsidy for this personnel education. Well, I think it's all. Thank you very much to all the participants.